Good afternoon and welcome to the Federal Executive Forum celebrating 19 years of profiling excellence in government IT mission programs. I'm Luke McCormack. During today's show, we will discuss critical issues facing government and industry leaders with their cybersecurity strategies and solutions. With me on today's show are Brigadier General Heather Blackwell, Deputy Commander, Joint Force Headquarters, Department of Defense Information Network. Robert Costello, Chief Information Officer, Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency at DHS. Dave McEwen, Deputy CIO for Cybersecurity and CISO, Department of Defense. Major General Chris Eubank, Network Enterprise Technology Command Headquarters. Lamont Copeland, Senior Director, Federal Solutions Architecture, Verizon Business Group. And Chris Roberts, Director, Federal Sales Engineering, Quest Software Public Sector. All right, we are talking about all things security, all things, in this case, Air Force. Brigadier General, we're going to start with you. Give us the state of the state. Well, first of all, what is your role there? What's your responsibility area? And then tell us about the state of how you all are doing over there.
Thanks, Luke, for the question. I'm, again, Brigadier General Heather Blackwell. I'm the Deputy Commander for Joint Force Headquarters, Doden. This organization is the one organization that brings together all the other elements that are out there. And what do I mean by that? The Doden itself, the DoD network, has about 2 million endpoints. It is the largest network in the world. So here at Joint Force Headquarters, Doden, we bring in, we are the centralized command and control location to make sure that all the other people that are operating across the Doden have one central place for command and control. We're very proud of that mission. As a matter of fact, last week we celebrated our 9th birthday. So happy birthday, Joint Force Headquarters Doden. We are 9 years old. With that mission, some of the key things that we've done recently, one of them may not be glamorous, but is really organizing this battle space. I just talked about how big the Doden is. I can't manage it all from this central location. So we have divided it out into what we call DoD areas of operation. So people who are in charge of different segments of the DoD network, we call them DAOs. And making sure that we have somebody who owns each segment is extremely important. So we have about 45 DAOs across the Doden that help us do command and control to make sure that we can secure, operate, and defend this massive network that enables every mission that's out there. Another thing that we're very proud of recently is our assessment program. And by that, I mean two things. One is automated assessment. We're making sure that we have something in place that is continuously monitoring the defensive posture of the Doden to make sure if adversaries are trying to compromise the Doden, that we can see it automatically. That is not always good enough, though. So we also have teams who we send out to key areas across the Doden and do inspections to make sure that terrain is as hard and secure as it can be, because it supports such a key mission for our Department of Defense. So again, thank you for allowing me to be on the show. I am very proud of the mission that we do at Joint Force Headquarters Doden.
And we're happy to have you on the show and appreciate that everything that you're doing to protect this nation, a massive responsibility. Mr. Costello, welcome back to the show. We're glad to have you on. And as always, Bob, well, first of all, you've been over there a couple of years now, and I know that you've been doing some a little bit of open heart surgery, rebuilding that environment over there, if you will. My words, of course. But I always like to start with, if you could just explain the role of the CIO at CISA versus sort of the broader CISA, especially in context of cybersecurity. Get that baseline, then tell us how's it been going for over the last couple of years.
Thanks, Luke. It's always good to be here. Always good to catch up with you and others. So it is kind of a little bit of a unique role. So my role is not that outward-facing front to kind of deal with the federal civilian executive branch or state and locals on the forward-facing operator side mission of CISA. So my office's role is to provide all the internal systems for CISA. So we operate as an agency. That could be everything from financial systems to HR systems. That's what we kind of started with when I got here. To your point, this office has kind of grown in leaps and bounds, and I couldn't be prouder of it. You know, I've been with DHS now for a while. Came from a much larger organization where we had, 5,000 people kind of working on IT. Came over here, like you said, about 2.5 years ago. Came back to DHS. Started with about 42 people. We're now up to well over probably about 150 feds, several hundred contractors, and we've now taken over all of the agency's IT systems, including mission systems, besides some of that core cyber mission functions that the cybersecurity director does. So that kicked off 1 October. We had a bunch of teams move over to my office, which has been wonderful. A lot of fun, a lot of hard work, but people are kind of integrating and all contributing to the mission. So we are now running all the systems for the National Risk Management Center, the infrastructure security, our field organization, integrated operations, the watch. If you're going to interact with CISA externally, we're upgrading systems now, and you'll start interfacing with my systems first, and then we will send that data over to our mission partners. We still maintain the cybersecurity director will build their systems, run their systems. We work in our partnership there, but we are starting to provide more of that core infrastructure. They don't want to run a network. We can provide that for them. They don't want to do asset management. They want to do their mission. So we're going to take that over. Core ICAM functions, those type of things. So our goal in my office is to be operator centric, forward leaning. We've gone from being like a daytime office back to 24/7, which is probably one of the hardest things. So that's what we're trying to do is, as CISA becomes more and more operational every single day, this year in particular, election 2024, we have a big part in securing the election, working with our partners. We're providing more services to state locals and the rest of the federal civilian executive branch and our mission partners over at DoD and the intel community. So my goal is to make sure that the operators have friction-free and reliable and usable IT systems. So that's our kind of big goal here. And that's kind of the state of the state over at CISA CIO.
Sounds fantastic. A lot of new leadership, a lot of new acquisitions, a lot of new technology, all with a lot of responsibility that you've taken on to really focus on allowing CISA to be all it can be. So appreciate that, and hats off to the job that you and your team has done over there. David, let's talk about the Deputy CIO of Cybersecurity and CISO, Department of Defense. Big role, a lot of moving parts there. I know you all have been on a cloud journey, a zero trust journey, et cetera. Give us a state of the state.
First of all, I want to thank you for having us here today, being able to talk about our initiatives. I would like to highlight that the DoD CIO and specifically the CISO role is responsible for policy, governance, metrics, oversight of the cybersecurity program for the whole Department of Defense. So we work a lot with the services and agencies. We work with Heather and her team, work with Cybercom, to make sure that all of our cybersecurity defenses are working well together. We also have
and
a role.
We really appreciate you pointing that out, by the way.
We interface with the federal government as a whole on all issues related to cybersecurity, and we also work with our partners throughout the world. NATO, Five Eyes, you name it, on cybersecurity initiatives and securing our network so that we can interoperate in a wartime. I heard you point out some of our key initiatives, and they are big ones. I think, are behind the curve, and we need to implement these things to catch up with our adversaries. The biggest one we have working right now is the Zero Trust Initiative. That is a massive transformation within the department. It involves a massive strategy and implementation plan, working with all of the components within the department to understand how they're going to roll out Zero Trust. We had the added problem of trying to do that in a product agnostic way, so that we want to be able to just test the environments that people build to make sure that they comply with the Zero Trust constructs. We've had a lot of success there, but we've got a long way to go. Our goal is to get to targeted Zero Trust by 2027. The second big initiative is working with industry. a variety of methods for us to help shore up the defense industrial base. We are the sector lead in the federal government for the defense industrial base, and we continue to work with them to shore up their cybersecurity so that our critical data is not lost on weapon systems, and make sure that production pipelines for critical systems stay up and running. That is a huge lift as well. It involves a lot of coordination internationally with the rest of the federal government, with Congress, with the White House, making sure that we get this right. We're not being too onerous, but we are improving the cybersecurity of these industry partners. And then lastly, the strategic cybersecurity program has been a major issue for us for a while. We are working on improving the cybersecurity of our weapon systems and our critical infrastructure. We're working very closely with ANS that has the lead on this within the Department of Defense, and the Joint Staff, and getting after a cultured list of weapon systems and critical infrastructure prioritized by missions, and doing assessments of each one of those and taking efforts to shore up the cybersecurity within each one of those. So those are our three major things that we're working on. Thanks.
Wow, I'm shaking my head because my head's spinning. I'm thinking about all those embedded systems and those environments that all of you have to protect, and it's just absolutely a daunting task and incredible. So we really do appreciate it. Major General, can you give us 30 seconds on what your role is there, your area of responsibility, and then give us a top line as to what's the status?
Yeah, thanks, Luke and Tom, first for inviting me to be part of this panel. It's a great group of folks. So I'll just build upon the last three guests. And so my role, I'm the commanding general for U.S. Army Network Enterprise Technology Command. What do? We run the Army's portion of the Department of Defense Information Network. So everything Heather talked about, we're working in concert with JFHQ Doden to run the Army's portion of that network. And so what does that mean? About 1.2 million endpoints, about 1 million customers. We talk about 288 post camps and stations in 32 countries. So that's our footprint as part of the larger Department of Defense Information Network. So that's who we are, and that's what we do. So to build upon Mr. McEwen, we are in the process of building an Army unified network based on zero trust principles. And the bottom line to that is we started this journey about 2 years ago. And what we realized was the Army had about 42 independent organizational networks in the Army. And so in the last 2 years, we've flattened that. We now only have 14 organizational networks left. So we're on this journey to get to one Army network based on zero trust principles, and on the same timeline that Mr. McEwen pointed out, which is 2027. So, and for us, it all starts with creating a unified network that is seamless across the globe, so you can move seamlessly as a user with either an account or a device. And so that's our journey right now, all in concert with the Department of Defense and JFHQ Doden, Heather and crew. So
I really do appreciate it. I'm once again smiling. And when you said only 14, I remember having to wrestle 11 and we were going crazy. And then I think about 42, and you just reminded of the massive scale that the United States Army is. So we appreciate everything that you're doing there. Lamont, let's talk about Verizon and what your role here is across the spectrum, and give us a top line state of the state. How's Verizon doing in helping these folks secure these environments?
Thanks, Luke. I appreciate the time and appreciate the offer to be here. So a lot of the things that we do is bringing and partnering with all these men and women to be able to make sure that they're able to deliver upon the mission, to be able to get the data, get the information, and have the situational awareness to be able to support what they do day to day to protect our nation, deliver the services, and do the things that they do for our great country here. My goal is to be able to bring all the network services, whether it's 5G, 4G networks, all the wireless side, satellite communications, connectivity of the wireline networks, to be able to connect all the bases, all the post camps and bases, all the offices and the places that all the government areas work together across the globe. But mainly across there and up to the topic of today is how do we make sure that we're protecting all that data? How do we make sure that we're providing the solutions and the capabilities to be able to work with the government to be able to ensure that they're meeting that zero trust mission that we just heard previously talk about, and ensuring that we get across, move that forward with what they're trying to do today. Looking at things from how do you have the insights and understanding of what's across the network, what part of it is critical, what are the risks associated with them, and then also understanding how all these things interrelate to one another. And then from our standpoint, not only just having that understanding and bringing those professional services to be able to support that, how do you then build and bring the security that's going to be inherently built into the network to be able to support the mission set today? A lot of it, I mean, the networks are inherently secure. We have to protect not only the government networks, but we have a huge consumer network too as well. How do we take a lot of that information, that understanding, and things that we've learned both on the consumer side and on the government side, bring that knowledge base together, bring the advancements of technology together, and then leverage all that insight, all the technology, and be able to use that to help the government meet that zero trust mission, meet the understanding, and protect all the men and the women that are supporting us today. So very glad to be able to be partnering with all these folks today.
And we certainly do appreciate the contribution that Verizon makes to help protect this nation at scale. Chris, how about Quest Software? Let's talk a little bit about what is this capability? What are these technologies, and then how do they fit in to the ecosystem here to strengthen these networks?
I don't know, Luke. You said we only had about 20 minutes, so I think I might want to keep it a little shorter. So, Quest Software, we are, I believe, we're the quiet partner in the federal ecosystem. We've been roughly in the federal space for almost 30 years. We have 90% of the federal agencies in DoD and IC as some of our customers. But quite frankly, we've been hearing about zero trust for a long time. We've been working on it in different degrees, both in the private sector as well as the public sector. One of the things we bring to bear is that collaboration between the commercial side of our corporation as well as the public sector. So the things we've learned in the large deployments in large commercial enterprises mirror some of the same goals that we see in the public sector. So when Bob talks about CISA and zero trust and helping agencies protect critical infrastructure, those critical infrastructure customers on the commercial side are also our customers. So think energy, think financial services, telecom, those are our clients too. So when we think about zero trust, we think about it across both of those planes. In the federal sector, it's a little bit more straightforward because you all have really well defined exactly zero trust. So when I hear General Eubanks talking about zero trust, I know exactly what their zero trust architecture is going to look like and how we actually fit our solutions into the architecture. So we collaborate both on the NIST cybersecurity framework side for core network functions, for instance. Think about protecting everything from Active Directory for identities all the way through zero trust, just-in-time delivery of credentials, privilege management, sessions management. Those are all the things we work on. But I think the most thing I'm proud of is our collaboration, both within our own internal organization, but also collaboration across the public sector. So every time we work with a DoD customer, we learn something. Every time we work with a civilian customer, we learn something. And one thing we've come to the conclusion is that I think everyone agrees that identity is the point where most of these networks converge. It's the thing we use to provide services. It identifies everything. It's sort of like the person, place, thing that lives on a network wire. So without going into like quantum theory, anytime you affect one identity, sometimes you affect something else on the network, on the wire. So our job is to protect that identity, bring that infrastructure protection, and make it really, I don't want to say the word easy, but reduce the complexity and bring a lot of automation into that process so that you guys can achieve those zero trust objectives in 2027. I've heard 2026. I'm going to shoot for 2025 to make sure that we are able to deliver that with our customers. But we are very proud of the work we've been doing and the deployments we've actually had. So we're very pleased. So thanks for having me.
And we really appreciate everything that you're doing to help these folks on the journey. Bob talks about frictionless, I think is what the term you were looking for there, as far as making it not easy, but frictionless so that these folks can do their mission. All right, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. You're listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Network. Welcome back to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Network. We are talking about cybersecurity, primarily focused on DoD and Department of Homeland Security. We're going to go up to you, Mr. Costello, and ask if you can give us a specific example that you'd like to highlight for the listening audience about an area that you've been concentrating on that maybe you have over the fence, getting ready to push over the fence, or planning on pushing over the fence.
Sure, it's a great question. I was actually just thinking about like seeing some of you all on here, and when you look back at your career, I don't think any of us ever thought we'd like be in these roles. Like, so I know we got some military here. Like, I was not that great troop after high school. Like, I joined because it was like the only option, and the Air Force was the best thing ever for me. And then I had exactly, thank you, General. And then I had great leaders. Luke, I worked for you as a junior troop for a while. When I came back to DHS, I knew I was taking over an organization that had some issues. It was underfunded. It had morale issues. Had gone through about a decade long of being, you're not a good organization. Not what was hard to take it over. And honestly, as you know, my first year was pretty darn tough.
And a lot of technical debt on
a lot of technical debt and a lot of debt just in general.
Yeah.
So what I'm seeing now is like I knew when I came back I would be here 3 to 5 years. That was kind of like my game plan. And as you know, I commute back and forth from New York City because I have like the best partner in the world who puts up with my craziness. We are now seeing all the things we built come together. So last Friday, vulnerability popped. We're probably several of us dealing with it on a certain product line. I had it integrated in a system we had just taken over 1 October. We have been preparing to kind of move off this tech stack and go through it. Well, the mitigation, the second we put it in place, the whole application, like unworkable, can't do this. So I was sitting with my deputy and we're going back and forth, and I'm very fortunate to have a deputy that you can have those hard conversations with, and he'll, give it back and forth, and we've worked together for a long time. And I'm like, I'm making the call, migrate it to the new solution this weekend. I hate to do it, but we got to do it. It was the only decision that was a path to getting us to a better place. Boy, was I worried about making that decision. What we got out of it, we're in a better place today. Sure, are we still troubleshooting issues and having things go on? Absolutely. But what we saw is this team that we've built over the last 2 years coalesced together, worked together, solved a problem together, and delivered a solution for the operators and our stakeholders that use this system in the SLTT community. This whole year from like now through the end of December is our massive migration. We are moving all these systems to things that we've built over the last 2 years, ground up. We've started really pure here. We're migrating to Microsoft Entra. There's no legacy Active Directory that we're migrating into. New cloud environments. It's really hard, and you have to make these really difficult decisions. And it's also hard on your people. Like, that's the hardest thing. I'm asking a very small team of people to migrate 10,000 direct users that we have that'll be now using our systems. Still a small agency between our federal and partner community and the contractor workforce. 8 to 10,000 users isn't big, nothing like we dealt with at CBP. But when you've never done it before, it's really hard. And when I was looking back on this, I'm like, well, thank goodness I had all these people that taught me that you never stop working hard. So when the type of leader you have to be when you're leading a technical organization through these is, you get a phone call on the weekend and I don't know, your boss's printer's out of toner cartridge. Well, if you can't find anyone else, you're driving in there and you're changing the printer. And that's the organization I'm trying to build. So this whole next year, you'll probably see less of me on programs like this, because we're going to be working harder than this office ever has to get CISA an operating environment that it needs to be an operational component effectively on the IT front at DHS, and also ensure that we can interact with our mission partners, whether it's in DoD, the intel community, elsewhere. It's really hard. I liken ourselves, Luke, to when I joined your office in 2008. We're about 5 years in at CISA. we were still dealing, remember the legacy INS, the Border Patrol systems and everything. That's what I have right now. At the end of this year, we will have a full operational unclassified IT environment for CISA. So that's what we're going to be doing this year.
Small but mighty, and we really do appreciate you being on the show every time you can take the time out. I saw some smiles out there when the printer cartridge came up. I think we all face that reality. Brigadier General, I'm going to ask you if you'd like to highlight a specific program that you all are working on, perhaps one that you're proud of, that has some real serious impact for you there.
Sure. Thanks, Luke. And I have to agree with Mr. Costello. I never thought I would be the deputy commander for an operational C2 organization as command and controlling the entire DoDN. When I came in 1997 with Banyan and Vines, I was only going to stay in for 5 years, and that was 26 years ago. But it's just the people that keep you in. I'm very proud of this mission. As for the successes here at Joint Force Headquarters DoDN, there are many, many things that I could talk about this morning. But what I really wanted to focus on was the partnerships. Again, I talked about how massive the DoDN is. So to do command and control of that, I can't do it alone. So our partnerships with Cyber Command and how they have operationalized some of the things that Mr. McEwen talked about, the CSSPs, our partnership with Mr. McEwen and the CIO, they're putting some amazing new technology out there. That technology, though, is an operational asset for the Department of Defense. So it's not just an IT system they put out there, but we need to be able to command and control, secure, operate, and defend that IT system that they put out there. NSA continues to be a great partner for us, providing that intel insight into the threats across the DoDN. And then, of course, our academic partners. Cyber Command has an awesome academic engagement network, and we're proud to be a part of that academic network. Two more, and that I would be remiss if I didn't say, is our international partners. If we do have to go to conflict, we're not going to do it alone. So making sure that we can communicate with our international partners across the cyber domain is extremely important. And lastly, we kind of mentioned it here, but it's our industry partners, that defense industrial base, making sure that they are securing their systems. And as Mr. McEwen said, securing the data, because they have a lot of DoD data. So we appreciate all the efforts that our DIB partners are doing to secure that data. So again, a lot of successes for Joint Force Headquarters DoDN, but I think the thing that makes us most successful is those strong partnerships.
Really do appreciate the call out on the partnership. Such a massive ecosystem. You can't do it alone. There's no question about that. Lamont, how about at Verizon? Where's an area that you'd like to highlight that you all are helping sort of stitch all this together?
Definitely in that partnership that Brigadier General Blackwell said, and trying to work with the government and trying to put not only the understanding of the technology, the things that are in place, but also working on some of the standards bodies too as well to understand how do we then provide that interaction back and forth and doing a lot of the feedback. One of the things that I've seen that I am proud of and very happy to be a part of is the interaction that the government has with industry to be able to get feedback on the zero trust strategy from the industry, be able to get feedback on what's the right way to be able to do some of the risk assessments, what's the right technology to be able to put into play, and what are some of the things from a standards body, especially with the evolution of technology and things that are coming out today, and things that are coming in the future that we got to prepare for to be able to protect the network. I mean, if you look at it today, a lot of it is understanding the risk associated with the data, which we just talked about here. How do we protect that data? What are all the things that are associated with that? How do we do the tie correlations when we do that assessment? There's the underlying network of those physical assets, which are part of your critical infrastructure. How do I then see those different pieces and how they're all linked together, then bring it up to that virtual layer? And how do I then provide that understanding and the control of that infrastructure and that network connectivity? Getting to Major General Eubanks, what he's talking about with bringing those networks together that they're doing with the Army. It's not just bringing together that information and the boxes, but it's then having that ability to be able to see across a whole environment and be able to control the programmability, the network infrastructure, and be able to get that visibility, change what they need to be able to get resources to be able to then move that mission forward. Those are some of the things that I'm proud to be a part of. And a lot of that is only done because of the communication back and forth between the government and industry to be able to say, how do we do that? And then also then some of the things with that from the standards bodies and understanding what's happening is the clarity that's being put around that. what we're seeing with the zero trust strategy that the government's putting out is the real definition around it, and then also the unification of it too as well. We're seeing where like things like how we deal with compliance, FedRAMP and DFARS, and how those are all coming together, and be able to give that strategy to be able to leverage each one of those things together so that we're utilizing and reusing some of the capabilities that are there and not having to rebuild that again, so that we could then bring down some of that technical and financial debt for the government, so that you're able to say, okay, here's how do we quickly move that mission forward? How do we then leverage what industry has, and how do we leverage what we have and bring those together to be able to protect the nation itself?
And we appreciate the reuse, and we appreciate the reference to the standards bodies and making sure that we're sticking to those standards. There's no way that you can keep this ecosystem together and run it properly without enforcing those types of standards. David, speaking of the ecosystem, a lot of reference to the various activities that you're doing over there. Would you like to highlight one for the community here?
Yeah, I can't do it justice in a short amount of time, but our Zero Trust project for the whole Department of Defense, I think, has been going better than I ever could have expected. Early on, after the SolarWinds compromise, we realized that persistent adversaries are going to get in. They're going to stay a long time. They're going to be able to move around. That software compromise that they put into that gave them a backdoor that they could use anytime. So we really needed to pivot to something new. We had been working on a zero trust reference architecture. We quickly closed that out, put it out. We next moved on to developing a strategy. And to Chris's point, the fact it warms my heart that he said that he could read that and understand it and know what industry needs to deliver. And that's exactly what we intended, because originally Zero Trust was kind of a ubiquitous phrase. Nobody really knew how to judge whether you had achieved it or not. So we set up a series of standards. We have our 7 pillars that we log and monitor and do analytics on. But most importantly is within those 7 pillars, we defined actual capabilities that you need to achieve, and clearly define what it means to achieve those capabilities. And then all of that needs to integrate together to achieve the zero trust outcome, which for us is you're not going to stop all adversaries. But the goal is if they do get in, they can't move around without detection, and we can quickly discover them and eradicate them from the network. Before we were working on this, we've had examples where the adversary's been on the network for 18 months before we discovered them. So this was a great pivot for us. The strategy was a foundational document. We next went to an implementation plan that defined what we needed to do going out to 2027. We then tasked the services to build their own implementation plans that would get them to zero trust. We received all of those late last fall. We reviewed all of them, gave feedback to everybody. Everything is progressing very well. One of the key things that we gave to the community too was 3 different methods in which you could achieve zero trust. One, you could uplift your own current environment by achieving all of those activities that need to be achieved. 2, you could go to a cloud service provider, and we've been engaging heavily with industry here to have them develop integrated solutions that we could test and tell everybody these are good to go. Go ahead and move in there. It's a zero trust environment. And then lastly, a purpose-built private cloud capability, which we have also tested, that you can deploy throughout the world in tactical environments on the edge and things of that nature. So we've built this roadmap. So it's sort of our operation plan. And now we're moving into the execution phase of this, where the services are starting to move into actual zero trust environments. And it's been a great effort. The leadership in the department is fully behind this. We've had to educate everybody. We've created training, online training. At every opportunity, we keep proselytizing this, even to our international partners. For instance, NATO now is going to establish a policy on zero trust and looking very heavily to what we've built. So I believe it is not to the finish line yet, but so far it's looking great, and we're getting a lot of cooperation, and I think it will be a huge success in the end.
Right. It's an architecture. It's a journey that you're on, and we really do appreciate you laying that framework out. and ensuring that, these adversaries can't get in there, camp out, move side to side, and clean house, so to speak. Chris, how about at Quest Public Software?
Well,
Can you give
first
us
we
an
have to,
example of something you'd like to highlight?
sure. I think first we have to address the two triggers I heard this morning. So someone said printer cartridge, and then I believe it was General Blackwell said Banyamin Vines, and man, that really triggered me. That was one of the first
she went
networks I
old
worked
school
on.
us.
It's a good story because we forget these early technologies. So Banyan Vines actually used an X400, 500 based directory architecture for both messaging and identity management. It was that directory architecture that we hired when I was at Microsoft. We brought in Jim Alchin came over, and that became the foundation of what we know as Active Directory today. So thanks for that, because that really triggered me this morning. But those things are critical. But when someone said printer, I started thinking about zero trust in the standpoint of, we talk about identity, and we love to talk about identity. But there are machines on our networks. We call them, IoT devices, but printers are one of them. And I found out the hard way that every time we photocopy something on a printer, that printer maintains a copy of that document. So when we dispose of a printer, the physical device, for instance, there is a hard drive in that printer with a copy of all the documents that were copied on that machine, which is actually interesting. So when you think of a hacker or someone who's trying to compromise a network, sometimes going after the low value machine, such as a printer, may have a trove of information that's more valuable to them than we thought was insignificant, for instance. So that means that just because that thing has an IP address, it needs an identity. So typically a printer may have a service account, it may not. But how we protect identity is not just about the individuals, the breathing biomechanisms that are used in computer networks, but also the machines that are on those networks. How we literally protecting the devices at those endpoints, for instance. And when we think endpoint security, too many times we just think laptop, mobile phone, but we need to start a little lower, as in the actual devices that have an IP address. And if you talk to folk at Saudi, I think it's Aramco, their worst disaster was because someone hacked a machine that had just simply had an IP address and was able to bring down their entire network one holiday weekend. So for us, we like to focus on identity because we believe good security begins with identity. The sources of truth that we all take for granted, like Active Directory, I think Bob mentioned that the migration between what we have today in on-prem systems going to Azure AD or Entra ID, for instance, maintaining, for instance, in the short term, a hybrid infrastructure, for instance, where people's identities will live on some on-prem system because of the applications and the technical debt we have there, but also living in the cloud, whether it's Entra ID or across other cloud platforms when they're using devices all over the world, for instance, and trying to provide secure access for the information they need to do their jobs. That mission, quite frankly, is the focus of anyone who has responsibility for protecting identities. So we think that source of truth, whether it's Active Directory, whether it's something you're going to put into Google's cloud or Amazon, for instance, or Entra ID, for instance, you have to figure out exactly how you're going to protect those new distributed architectures for authentication, for authorization, and whether it's something ubiquitous like Azure AD or Entra ID, you have to figure out exactly how you're going to treat that, what we call the heart that breathes the resiliency into your network. So we focus on that, and our future, for instance, and our initiatives are all around that with our civilian as well as DoD customers. And we've built out so many different strategies for them on basic zero trust principles, for instance. But we realize, like you said, Luke, it's a journey. And we realize that there's so many different solutions that come into that stack. So I wish there was a solution if we had to say, hey, get this and your problem is solved. And what we simply learned is that sometimes you're going to have one solution in one layer of that stack that'll do logging and auditing, for instance, another that's going to do privilege management. And the key is for industry to make sure these solutions work well together and play well together. And that's sometimes hard in the commercial world where we're competitors, but you have to figure out basically how to work together in a mission environment, for instance, to help deliver the outcomes that our customers and our government entities actually expect. So,
amen. And we appreciate the working together, and the focus on what's on your environment and who's on your environment is key to the success here. We're going to take a short break. We'll be right back. You're listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Network. Welcome back to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Network. We are talking about cybersecurity, the ecosystem, focusing primarily on both DoD and DHS. Speaking of DoD, Major General, we're going to ask you to highlight a specific program that you'd like to raise the awareness for in regards to cybersecurity.
All right, thanks, Luke. First and foremost, I think I'll build upon the rest of the guest comments. So none of this happens without people, and that people is, in my space, it's military, it's Department of the Army civilians, I'll say DoD civilians, it's contractors. So it's our vendor partners, international partners when it comes to, the coalition. But so it's all about people. But two things I think for the Army that I think are important as we get towards this unified network based on zero trust principles are what we call Army Unified Directory Services. So I heard one of the guests talk about get rid of all these active directories. And so that's our goal, is to create, one space for the Army so you can move efficiently and effectively across the globe, both as a person and devices. And so that's a huge lift for us right now as we roll that out globally. And then tied to that is what we call USIEM. So security information event management. And so what we've done and over the last 6 months is create a unified platform so that we can see not just devices in what we used to call the enterprise network, but all the way down to the tactical edge. So we now at Netcom can see devices that are deployed at the National Training Center as part of a tactical network, which allows us to collect data, security event data, and feed that all the way back up to the Army Cyber Command Enterprise, and then back up to Cyber Command so that we can analyze the data and figure out what's going on inside the network. So those are the two huge lifts over what we'll say fiscal year 24 that I think set the foundation for this unified network based on zero trust principles. And so those are the two big things we're getting after as part of the larger Department of Defense zero trust effort.
Fantastic, and we really do appreciate that. We're going to go to priorities. I'm going to start with Brigadier General. Top priority, I know you have a lot of moving parts going on. Top priority for you all this year in 2024.
Yeah, thanks, Luke. I'll hit them really fast because you're right. We could have many, but I've always told my folks we can't do everything. So focusing on those priorities is critical. I'll hit on one that has been brought up a couple of times in this forum, which is tech debt. The soon-to-be commander of U.S. Cyber Command has talked a lot about how do we use intel, threat-informed activities to be able to target those areas of tech debt that we need to get rid of. So getting rid of tech debt in an intel-informed way is one big priority. Readiness is also a word that you will continue to hear from U.S. Cyber Command and Joint Force Headquarters Doden a lot. Readiness of our people, readiness of our CSSPs, and readiness of the terrain itself. And we can get to that readiness through automation. And by automation, I don't just mean, well, let's go block an IP. There's so much more than that. How do we use the MITRE ATT&CK framework to go after the adversary's heuristics, if you will, the behaviors that an adversary has out there to be able to secure this terrain? And then one that you continue to hear throughout the discussions today is data. Making sure that we have data standards all the way from the endpoint so that we can command and control across those 45 DAOs that I talked about. I don't want to have the data all here. As General Eubank discussed, unified platform is a way to bring that data together. I want to be able to do heuristics across that data and make sure that that we see the adversary activity across this massive DoD network. So many priorities as we go into 2024.
Thank you very much, Bob. I feel like the last 2 years you've been, sort of digging yourself out of this hole. You're on flat surface now, so to speak. Top priority for you in 2024.
Yeah, I'm not sure ever in IT or cyber if you're ever on a flat surface. We never know when the ground's going to change underneath us.
Sure.
Which I think General Blackwell and General Eubank kind of alluded to. So I think to be successful in our career paths, you have to align your priorities to your agency's priorities. So right now we are very tightly integrated. I'm very happy to say that Director Easterly and the Deputy Director here, they really make the CIO's office part of the mission and make sure that we're getting the right resources that we need and that we are integrated across the agency. And that wasn't previously something that happened in the NPPD days. or the early days of CISA. So I'm very fortunate that we have that kind of tie back to our front office and agency leadership. My first thing this year is taking care of my people. I know it's going to be a stressful year. I liken it to 2015 when we went through cyber summer at DHS. A lot of people working 90-hour work weeks. That's not sustainable. And then the other thing that I'm really concentrating on, I believe it was Mr. McEwen that mentioned it, is I can't stop every adversary from getting in. Simply can't. It's how you deal with it afterwards, and how you detect it, how you respond. Do you know your data? Do you know what's going on in your environment? So what and someone mentioned it, resiliency. How do I build a resilient workforce? A, that is resilient when Bob decides to leave. Never build an organization around yourself.
Bingo.
And B, that my team can get the time off. No one's, because we all did it. Like I did it when I was technical. I'm going to work that 24-hour shift, fix this problem, going to be the hero. I was never my best for 2 to 3 days after that. So I'm trying to not recreate the organizational environment that exists in other IT offices at DHS where that is the culture. So we're trying to do something a little bit different here. I'm hoping that I'm going to be successful. I will fail sometimes. We had a 24-hour shift yesterday because we had to, but I want to make sure that we respond better than maybe we had done in other parts of DHS or anywhere. It's a systemic problem that we take care of the people after the event. Because that's when you'll lose people, is people don't want to work anywhere where they don't feel valued.
You grow and you learn, and we really do
You do.
appreciate that, Bob, and it's been a pleasure watching you grow and learn. David, how about at Department of Defense, top priority for you in the CIO shop?
So real quickly, I previously gave our top 3 things that we're working on: Zero Trust, DIB, cybersecurity, and then the Strategic Cybersecurity Program, which is weapon systems and critical infrastructure. One of the things I want to focus that's cross-cutting on is software. It was the root cause of the problem with SolarWinds. It continues to be a problem for many attacks within the world. We are not doing a good job of developing secure software from the beginning. And when we have weapon systems that are 80% software, it's very concerning if we are not developing that software in an environment that, one, is secure itself, that can secure what's going on in there, but also produces secure code so that we know that it doesn't have any backdoors, it doesn't have any flaws in it. We know there are tools out there. We need to start pushing people to that. Within the department, we're going to be adopting DevSecOps environments. We've got a number of software factories out there inside the department. The problem becomes a little harder outside the department when we're dealing with our DIB partners that are developing software for us. You're going to see some policy changes coming out from us. One, we are going to declare that software that they're developing, not COT software, but government-operated software that they're developing for us to be used inside weapon systems and other things. We're going to declare that as controlled unclassified information. So then it becomes viewable when we go out and do a CMMC assessment to make sure that they're properly safeguarding that data. There's a category of CUI called critical technical information or critical design information. That's what we're going to start tagging as we contract with vendors, that they need to handle that in a very secure manner. We have to stop thinking that development environments are not important. We've had numerous development environments that people just drop out on GitHub. It's unsecure. That code is going to go into a production system somewhere. And if you're giving the adversary a heads up as to what that code does by them examining it fully, they're going to be able to find weaknesses. So we've got to do a better job at software. So we're going to be focusing on that a lot in 2024.
Fantastic. And Director Easterly always mentions secure by design, and I think that's a really good principle. Major General, top priority for you this year?
Yeah, so kind of highlight them already. So it's all about what we call Army Unified Directory Services. So flattening those networks, the unified seam. So being able to see ourselves and then push that data up, down, and laterally across the greater network, I think is very important. One thing I didn't talk about, but is very, very important to us this year is engineering and implementing Comply to Connect across the Army's portion of the Department of Defense Information Network, which is no small feat, but we've started, we have it in some locations already, but we continue to push that effort as it's a critical component to the zero trust environment. But again, Mr. Costello talked about it. None of that happens without people. And so a big priority this year for us is talent management. So how do you recruit the right talent? How do you retain that talent once you get them on board? And so everybody on this session is looking at the same talent every day. And so it's critical that as partners, we understand, we're all looking at the same talent, trying to hire the same talent for the same mission. And so talent management is huge to us across both Army Cyber and Network Enterprise Technology Command, because it doesn't happen without the people.
Talent management, resilient workforce, very important. All right, we're going to wrap it up here, and we're going to talk about the future. Fast forward 2 to 3 years. Chris, I'm going to start with you at Quest Software. What's it look like 2 to 3 years from now? What's a demand signal that you all are getting? I think you touched on some of the things that you're going to be working on.
So in the years to come, I think the market has spoken. I mean, you all know what the elephant in the room is going to be. But I think there are some things that relate back to, I think, technical debt and accomplishing that zero trust journey that we're currently on. So we got to keep our eye on that particular prize and let the nice shiny toys wait a second, for instance. So we focus things, and we believe that cyber resilience is still going to be something that's going to be critical for every agency and every DoD entity. So, but we need to move beyond just being the simple preparatory moves we do for data loss prevention. That is, having good backups and a backup strategy. I asked the question, well, what are you exactly backing up? So we work with our customers and we think about exactly how do you identify all your data within the organization? How do you tag it, for instance? And how do you know who has access to it? How do you control it, for instance? So in other words, it's not just zero trust for accessing the network, but now it's what is zero trust going to do for you for the actual data that's on the network? Because as McEwen said, I can't stop every adversary, for instance, but the one that does get through, well, what did they access and who had control of it and what was exfiltrated and what do we need to do to cauterize that particular breach? The other thing is, when to finish off on that zero trust journey, is there's so many different tools that are required, for instance, that just to build that network in itself means that I have to get rid of implicit trust. Implicit trust is something that so many of us have gotten used to. Think of the person who is sudo, who has domain admin rights, for instance, and you go to that person, it's like, hey, I need your domain access back because you're only supposed to be doing provisioning for these types of objects on the network, for instance. That's a political struggle. I don't think that's going to go anytime soon. So our job really is to give the ability for our customers to do just-in-time privileging, for instance, for those end users, so they still feel they have the right access and the right capabilities to do the mission they're actually supposed to be doing. The other thing that I think we haven't really talked about is that in the future, we still are going to be faced with supply chain issues. Internally at our company, at Quest Software, we figured out exactly that. Well, you know what? Either you start nearshoring or onshoring your software development, you prepare for the fact that you have to attest what your software contains, where it was designed, was it built secure in the first place? We're well on our way to be able to do that. So we were fully prepared at the end of last quarter to start attesting where our software came from and what was actually in our code, which is very important for our mission partners. The last thing I'll say is that we can't ignore the fact that AI is coming. Everyone's talking about it. A lot of vendors say their products are AI ready or AI capable. I think the important question basically is, what are we using to train that AI? So when you look at our networks today, we have a rich set of data, whether it's logs, whether it's security event monitoring systems, for instance, we have lots of data, and never mind the actual critical data that's sitting in Office files, in SharePoint farms, for instance, that we discount. All that data can be used to train models, for instance, that General Eubanks and General Blackwell and Bob, for instance, and McEwen, you all can use this data to train specific models in your environments to understand exactly what the threats that you're going to face for today. And I think a lot of people look at the general models that are out there saying like, these things are going to solve our problems. No, not until you give it the right amount of information and the right data, for instance, on your network, closed off, for instance, where you can control it. Think of this just like an Oracle database or a SQL database. Well, would you give access to everyone outside of the government to that, to the database? No, you wouldn't. I treat AI data the same way. So when you can treat and develop your own models and leverage all that great infrastructure data you've collected over the years to train a model, I think our nation will be a lot more secure, because that's going to help us plug holes before people get access, and maybe it'll make us a little bit smarter at the same time. And unfortunately, maybe a machine actually helps us do that. So bring on the matrix.
Chris, we really do appreciate that. Lamont, how about at Verizon? Fast forward, what are we going to see 2 to 3 years from now? Fully implemented 5G, private 5G networks from sea to shining sea, 6G, what's it going to be?
Yeah, no, you're going to see a lot of that and some more, Luke, there. But no, I mean, there's going to be that connectivity. What we got to look at is how the everything's moving towards the edge. And Chris hit upon it really well. I was going to mention about the AI and providing data insights. I mean, we just recently had a Wall Street Journal article that you guys may have saw, where we were able to use that AI to be able to figure out things that were happening inside the critical infrastructure network that we were able to detect and be able to thwart some of the activity that was happening there. And a lot of it's going to be happening because we are going to be pushing more and more information and more technology towards the edge, to where we are in theater, whether it's somewhere in Bahrain or for somewhere here in California. How are we going to be able to push all that data out, but then protect it and then get the insights to be able to support what we're doing, to be able to see activity, movement, and to get ahead of what the threat's going to be, so that we can then put specific actions into there. This has been said throughout this conversation. We're not going to be able to stop everything that's coming in, but the more and more insights that we can do, the more ability that we'll be able to have to be able to get ahead of that as much as we can, and be able to then stop when there is some kind of breach, to be able to say, okay, here's how I can quickly cut that off at the head, and then reduce the impact that it has. And then also the one future thing I think we're going to want to look at too is, yes, we've talked about the future of AI coming into here, but there's also looking at the encryption and encryption modules. And I would be remiss to not talk about quantum too as well, because that's one of those things where, yes, that is a few years out, but there's a lot of activity that's being done in that space, from quantum security with the encryption modules that we're looking at. You look at the National Security Memorandum 10, what we're trying to look at to be able to protect all the data that we have here. And then also things with like quantum sensors and quantum networks that are being developed and things that are being put in place today. Those are things that are maybe not 1 to 2 years out, more like maybe like 5 years out, or maybe a little bit longer. But all these things tie together, because what it's going to do is quickly and in a rapid pace pull together AI and this rapid computing to be able to then do more things faster, to be able to attack our networks, but also in our turn be able to do more things faster to protect the networks.
We look forward to seeing that capability get rolled out in the 2 to 5 year time frame. Major General, 2 to 3 years from now, what do you expect this environment to look like for you?
Yeah, so the expectation is we actually have a unified network that allows us to take complexity out of the tactical formation while leaving capability and capacity there, right? So it's not taking capability from the tactical formation, but it's taking complexity out of the tactical formation. And that unified network based on zero trust principles allows access to data anytime, any secure data anytime, any place, in order to enable decision making at the lowest level. So, I mean, ultimately, that's the goal. Again, I'm looking at a screen full of partners that hopefully, we all arrive at this time and space in 3 years, and although we're not stopping everything from happening, we understand why it happened and how to get after fixing it. And so, but I think 3 years from now, it's a unified network based on zero trust principles that allows decision making at the lowest level while pulling complexity out of that tactical formation.
Really do appreciate everything that you're doing. David, you talked about your 3 priorities, and then you rolled in the supply chain issues. 2 to 3 years from now, let's say we're looking at the beginning of 26. Are those things sort of over the fence and you're working on the next round of priorities, or?
I think they're all still ongoing.
Mm-hmm.
The targeted date for Zero Trust was 2027. I think we'll start seeing, though, systems roll out that we'll be able to red team, validate. Additionally, we invested in some continuous monitoring capabilities that will allow us to continually test environments that we've deemed that are Zero Trust. We'll just keep running tests against them in an automated fashion to make sure that the shields stay up and that the Zero Trust functionality stays in place there. I think it's important, as all the gentlemen said, that we continue to evolve our use of AI. I've seen great examples of how AI has been used to turbocharge virtually anything that you want to do. So we really need to get after that task. So in addition to providing the defenders an integrated solution that is less complex to manage and gives them more visibility, I think we've got to go forward and work together on logging and analytics and orchestration and automation so that those humans that are scarce, the smartest ones, and using AI can tune the tools to be more responsive and automated and require less human intervention. Right now, if you've watched analysts in a SOC, they're getting some data out of one tool, taking that, moving it over into another tool, getting some more data out of that tool, swinging over to the next tool. We need integrated solutions, and we do need all of this combined data to be able to work on together in one environment in a cogent manner. And again, automation, orchestration are going to be key. China has way more people than we do to throw at the problem. So our only hope is to automate a lot of this effort.
Sure, machine to machine is the way to go. We really do appreciate it, David. Robert, you'll have been over at the helm there for approximately 4 years, a couple years from now, and you got a lot of these pieces and parts together. What do you expect? What are you shooting for that environment to look like a couple years from now?
It's a great question, and I think we're so good at. I've tried to be cautious about predicting things because it's
Sure.
so hard. And when we're in the moment, remember when ChatGPT came out and announced, and everyone's going to lose their job, and did things change to a degree? Sure, but not to the degree we thought they would. Just like 5G didn't revolutionize things to the extent that we thought it would when we were talking about it in 2017. It's a big deal. It's dramatically different. I think that one of the things that is important for me is, how do we kind of manage through all this change, and then how do we act or in the right way to all the different generations that we currently work with. So it's really hard right now. When I look back at it, you can read these articles all the time. Cyber attacks are increasing. Well, yes, so is technology usage. Yeah, my first car was a 1979, I think, Volkswagen Rabbit, which was a stick shift and diesel. So everyone that knows me on your radio show, Luke, can imagine the horror of me trying to drive a stick shift car. I'm not a good driver. Nothing was connected back in the 90s. Very little in the mid 2000s. So are you seeing an increase? Absolutely. You're seeing an increase in how we're using technology. So one of the things that we're pushing at CISA, and you mentioned it, the Secure Our World, Secure by Design. Those are things that I'm really worried about. And it was brought up to the development environments. That's a huge concern of mine right now. For CISA and just the larger, just as we think about things as federal IT professionals or military IT professionals, compromise your code before it gets into production. That's a big deal. And it's really something that I think we need to talk more about and start addressing. And code is it was kind of funny. My niece, she's getting into IT and stuff, and so I'll help her with stuff. And boy, you can write some good code in ChatGPT. It's pretty impressive. Do I think it's going to get rid of the humans? No. not right away. Can it augment us? There's some phenomenal tools out there. So I think it's, yeah, we have to manage through the change and adjust. And for those of us on the call, we're leaders. Like, we have to help our teams manage through the change. None of us is hands-on keyboard anymore, except in Word and Excel. We probably all miss doing that. So those are my things, Luke. It's not, I don't know where I'll be in 2 to 3 years. What I want for CISA, though, is to have all those capabilities that you need when you're an operator. So I want them to have good development environments. I don't want them, if I could say one thing about this office, I don't want anyone to ever have to work around CISA OCIO because they can't get a responsive answer,
Right.
or things like that would be the most beautiful modernization thing ever. If everyone's like, there's an office at CISA, it's the CIO's office, that we don't have to work around, do rogue IT, put a development environment on a purchase card, because of that. Because one of the things that's super hard for all of us is when you don't have control of all the IT, it can be really hard to manage it. And then as unlike in other places at DHS, only the CIOs are the authorizing officials. So it's super hard to authorize something if you can't see into it or know how it was designed. So that's something that I think that we're really making big improvements on over here at CISA.
Really do appreciate it. It's a great benchmark, and you worked really hard to wrestle those capabilities into your organization there. Brigadier General, 2 to 3 years from now, what are you shooting for that environment to look like?
Thanks, Luke. And what does the future look like? Put frankly, the future is people. We need a diverse workforce that understands the value that they bring every single day. And diversity is multifaceted, to include cognitive diversity. Securing, operating, defending the world's largest network is a wicked problem. If we all think the same, we are going to fail. So the future is people, and we need a workforce that is postured for today's competition and ready for tomorrow's fight.
We really do appreciate that, and we thank you for all of your service. And I want to thank all of you for taking your time out of your busy schedules to participate with us on this show. I'd also like to thank the sponsors for supporting us on this show. I'd like to thank the good people here at Federal News Network that make our program so successful and enjoyable. And most of all, I'd like to thank the listening audience out there that tune in every month. You've been listening to the Federal Executive Forum, part of the Federal News Network.